Alrighty, and here we are. We are live for Radicalized here on the Beaver Network. And we're just going to do a little bit of... Chris, welcome to the show. We are just on the pre-show here to Radicalized at 6 o'clock here on the Beaver Network. Silver Capri, welcome to the show here. I just want to speak with the international audience if you're joining in tonight. If you are living outside of North America, when I put the boxes up, I hope you'll invite yourself in. We'd love to get an international flavor to the show tonight. So if you are watching from somewhere other than North America, stay tuned. We'd love to have you up and hear your opinion and perspective from somewhere else in the world. So if you're just a Paisley native, welcome to the show. We are just on the pre-show. Welcome, Jody. We're just on the pre-show here to Radicalized, starting at 6 o'clock here on the Beaver Network. The Beaver Network has shows 7 days a week, multiple times a day. Whatever your flavor of host, you're going to find them here on the Beaver Network, because the Beaver Network is for the peoples, because it is by the peoples, including yourself. I am your host tonight, Mr. Radical, and the show is Radicalized, starting at 6 o'clock Mountain, 8 o'clock Eastern. So if you're just joining in, and you're joining in from a different part of the world here than North America, I'm hoping that you'll, when I put the boxes up here at 6 o'clock, that you'll want to join in. We'd love to get an international perspective from you and get an opinion from other parts of the world and what we're seeing. But I think tonight, I think there's something that I need to bring forward. I think it needs to be discussed that, yes, a good portion of what we're seeing with the conservative side is absolutely brainwashing. However, I believe that not all of them can be saved. Not all of them are brainwashed. The reality is that a lot of these people they are Trump. That is why they side with him. They see, two birds of a feather will stick together, and that's exactly what we're seeing with the Republican side. So while, yes, a good portion of them have been brainwashed, there are some that haven't. They want this. They want what's happening. They want to see other people that they don't like punished, and that is what they see. They basically see another idiot, one of their own. That's why they associate with them, finally having the power to really put it to the people that they don't like, all of these smarmy intellectuals and all of these smart people. That's really what this is about, is an anti-intellectualism stream, this need for the conservative base to have their feet so firmly planted in the ground that they simply can't lift their eyes to the sky anymore. And that's an unfortunate thing, because I firmly believe that it slows down all of our progress, and it's unfortunate because it is simply setting humanity backwards. Kevin, Jason, welcome to the show. We're just on the pre-show here to Radicalized. At 6 o'clock, we'll be putting some boxes up. If you're joining in from another part of the world that isn't North America, I'm hoping that you'll stick around and invite yourself in. We'd love to get an international perspective and see what's going on in other parts of the world, because I believe so much of what we're seeing here in North America is interconnected with a lot of what's going on in other parts of the world. This framing of heading toward the right, in a lot of ways, the most prosperous, easiest times that humanity has ever faced. We have, at this point in time, the most access to education, to health, to food, to stable governments that we've ever had. And yet somehow so much of our population has been convinced that we are basically ready to walk over the cliff's edge. So we're going to break some of that down tonight. I'll lay it out for you at 6 o'clock. Beautiful Cole, welcome to the show. YYC Alberta, welcome to the show. And I think that's where we want to head tonight. I think this is something that needs to be broken down, because the reality is that, even after the atrocities of the Second World were laid bare for everybody to see, we still had people that went to their graves espousing Gestapo ideology. And I think what we're seeing here in Canada and in America and in other parts of the world is an extension of this in our own times. There's going to be people that will side against humanity. And I think that's the reality that a lot of the rest of us have to put front and center. I don't think that this is something that we can ignore anymore. The reality is that part of our own species is working against us. That's it. So if you're just joining in, welcome to the show. We're just on the pre-show here to Radicalized, starting at 6 o'clock here on the Beaver Politics Network. And Beaver Politics is now available on YouTube, so if you miss an episode, you can catch it on YouTube. And you can also catch us on our Discord channel as well. If you want to chat with some of us Beaver creators and other like-minded people, we're there, Beaver Dam, on Discord. So if you're just joining in, thanks for joining in. Welcome to the show. We're just on the Satan's Intern. Welcome. Brad Whitcomb, thank you. So we're just on the pre-show here till 6 o'clock. Starts up here in about 5 minutes. I'm going to lay it out once again, kind of what we're going to discuss tonight and see sort of where we go for it. When I put the boxes up, we're going to have our guests in as always. But as always, here on the Beaver Networks, the way that we operate is everybody gets a chance to speak. If you're up in the box and you're not speaking, please have your microphone off. The way that this works is Beaver Network is about knowledge through discourse. The only way we get that discourse is if everybody gets a chance to speak. So if you're just joining in, welcome to the show. We're going to be starting up here in about 5 minutes. And like I said, I think the big discussion point, I think, tonight has to be Radicalized is about the little bit deeper than the politics involved, and I want to talk about the psychology of what's involved and the bigger picture of what's going on here. I think the bigger picture, we need to zoom out every once in a while and have a look at what is the big picture and what is happening basically across the board, whether it's here in North America. And that's why I'm hoping that Radicalized becomes more of an international show. And if you're watching and you're not based in North America, I'm hoping that you'll stick around at 6 o'clock here when I put the boxes up. I hope you'll invite yourself up, give us an international perspective, get a little bit of a taste for what's happening in other parts of the world, because all of this, I believe, is interconnected. It's absolutely all interconnected. Kimmy, welcome to the show. And that connection is what we're seeing. Now, we know with the IDU that the IDU's stated goal is the advancement of conservative governments and the voting in of conservative governments. We know that their ideological statements say that they are working together. We know this for a fact. So everything that we've seen in the States is what we are going to see here in Canada. That's the reality of the situation. Much like our cultural and societal ties to America, we just tend to lag a little bit behind, but it always catches up here. I think that's something that Canadians have known for a long, long time. So I'm just going to do a little bit of maintenance here. If you're just joining in, thank you. I'm just going to put the boxes up here. And we'll start to slowly get ready for the show here. If you're just joining in, welcome to the show. I am your host, Mr. Radical. The show is Radicalized here on the Beaver Network. Let's bring that down a little bit. The Beaver Network is all about knowledge through discourse. The only way that happens is if everybody gets a chance to speak. We want to hear opposing viewpoints because that's how knowledge is brought to the forefront. And sharing and learning about what is going on is what my show is all about. We want to pull back and look at a little bit of the bigger picture of what's going on. And I think, like I said, we have to look at the bigger picture that not everybody has been brainwashed. Not everybody has simply been fooled into the idealism of the right. And I think that's something that, as content creators, that we have to bear that responsibility of understanding of who our target audience is, and the fact that no matter what we say to a lot of these people, it simply won't make a difference. And that's what tonight's show is about. So if you're just joining in, thanks for joining in. We are just on the pre-show here to Radicalized. I am your host, Mr. Radical, here on the Beaver Network. Beaver Network is all about knowledge through discourse. So if you're watching and you're not from North America, I'm hoping that you'll invite yourself up into one of the boxes. We'd love to get an international perspective here on what we are talking about here. But as I mentioned, I really think that we have to look a little bit deeper into the psychology of what is happening across the globe here. And I'm going to put it into a little bit of perspective, and then we'll kind of go from there. Sparkle and shine. Welcome aboard. Always great to have you. Remember, guys, tapping is clapping, sharing is caring. Appreciate all of your efforts, and all of us creators here on the Beaver Network appreciate your loyalty and everything that you do for us and all of the time that you spend with us. Time is the most important commodity that we have in this life, and any time that you spend with us here on the Beaver Networks is something that we are happy to take and also happy to give back because we know how precious it is. All right, we're just going to do a little bit of site maintenance here. If you'll bear with me. Barb Gold, thank you. Francis, welcome to the show. We're just on the pre-show here to Radicalized. What I'm hoping is that somebody from our international audience, if you're not here from North America, I'd love to get your perspective. If you could invite yourself up into the box here, we'd love to have you. If you are American, if you are Canadian, invite yourself in here. Love to hear from you and get your perspective on things. So we're just hitting for 6 o'clock here, and let's start the show. So, hello everybody, if you're just joining in. I am Mr. Radical. The show is Radicalized here on the Beaver Network. And today's show, I think we have to focus on the reality that not everybody can be saved. Not everybody is brainwashed. As I mentioned earlier, we know that after the Second World War, when the realities of what had happened had been laid bare for everybody to see, that there was still those that went to their graves still espousing Gestapo ideology. So we have to understand, and I talk about population demographics often, we have to understand that no matter how we look at certain things for being on the wrong side of the equation, there are always going to be those that uphold that side. If Dump were to happen to have a stroke tomorrow and off he went, there will be people that will martyr him, for he will become an emblem, an icon, and that is something that I worry about an awful lot, that if the fat fucker finally has a Big Mac attack, that he is going to set himself up as a martyr. And as we all know, there is no way to assail a martyr. And that's exactly the problem, because what we have now is a situation where no matter how evil, no matter how right-wing, authoritarian, they present certain things, they absolutely will have a backing. They absolutely will have a part of the population that will follow them. They absolutely will have a part of the population that will militarize to make sure that it happens. And that is my point here tonight. And I think the point that I need to make tonight is that, yes, a lot of people have been brainwashed. Yes, a lot of people have been convinced that even though we live in some of the safest times in human history, where we have the most access to education, to healthcare, to entertainment, to travel, to understanding, to knowledge, and yet, when you listen to right-wing podcasts, you would think that humanity was literally on the very verge of collapse. And that is how effective the propaganda is, yes. However, for a good chunk of that population, it is not mind-changing propaganda. It is reinforcing propaganda. And that is where the fire comes from. They are already angry. They are already disenfranchised. They are already ready to tear things apart. And all the Republicans and social media doing is pouring fuel on that fire. And the harder the blaze from the very far right goes up, the harder it's going to be for those around it to pull away, even though they're burning. And that's where we're going to start off tonight. So if you're just tuning in, thanks for tuning in. That's kind of the soliloquy here. Okay, America First, I'm going to accept you in, as always, on the show here. If you're not speaking, please have your microphone turned off. This is a stage for everybody to have a chance to have their say. So, America First, can you give us an age?
Sir, I'm 37. I'm living in the city. So I would rebuttal you about the Republicans that you would be
Okay.
dead wrong. That it is the
Okay.
Democrats who push out the propaganda. So much so that they had been funding Politico through USA. You know the newspaper called Politico?
Yeah.
That was funded by Democrats. Okay.
Okay.
They went after their opponents politically. They started persecuting them. And on top of it, the way you just spoke about the Republicans is just I don't understand it. I don't see the Republicans condoning burning American flags and defacing American monuments. Did you watch the inauguration? Did you see the only thing Republicans cheered for was sending more money to Ukraine, goddammit. They didn't even cheer for a kid who had got admitted to West Point.
Okay, so hang on, Amara, slow down. Okay, so you've covered already like half a dozen different subjects, so you're just trying to snowball me here. So stick to one subject. You started out with Politico, but what is Fox News other than TV Politico, bud?
Yeah, but sir, it wasn't being funded by the government. That's the difference.
No, not directly, but the fact of the matter is here in Canada, most paper news outlets are owned by Republican backers here in Canada. Most of the news that we
Well,
get
that's
is,
Canada, sir. I'm talking about
yeah,
America.
but you have the same thing.
We're
Are you
not
telling
supposed to
me
have
that?
that. You can't have the
So,
government doing that.
but you have the rich people that are already influencing the government that
That's
run
different.
things like
That's
Fox
different.
News.
That's not on the government's dime. If some rich guy wants to go establish Rich Guy Incorporated and put that station
Now,
towards the Republicans,
okay,
that's a
Bud,
whole
I'm
other
sorry,
conversation.
I'm sorry, Bud, but who is the head of the Republican Party?
But why is it when I tell you something Democrats doing wrong, you point right to the Republicans? They shouldn't have been doing that. They
Because the
shouldn't have been using
Republicans
taxpayer money
are,
to fund
because,
Politico.
hey, hang on, Bud. Because right now, the ones that are in power are Trump and the
Trump.
Republicans. So when you listen to Donald Trump, what do you hear?
Sir, I hear an American patriot, an American hero.
And I hear a child, somebody with a grade 5 vocabulary.
Sir, I have a question. Have you ever interacted with him?
I don't have to. I just
have you ever spoken to him? Do you know anybody that's done business with him? Oh, well, he came to my grandfather's 80th birthday and shook his hand. I would tell you, sir, he's a lot of things. He may be a dope. He may say some crazy stuff. He is a smart guy. And just because you don't like the way he talks doesn't make him not intelligent.
Speech is literally the determiner of your
Sir, just
intelligence.
because he doesn't have a filter and he could say whatever he wants doesn't
Lots of
doesn't
people could
mean
say
doesn't
whatever
mean
they
he's not
want and
smart.
still not come across like
Sir,
a grade
sir, I
schooler.
will agree with you that he's a shady businessman. Okay, that's a fair statement. But to say
A
he's dumb
felon
based on the
and a
way he talks,
rapist and a
based on the way he
felon
talks, is
and
a
a
whole nother
rapist.
ball game.
Hang on. And a felon and a
Sir, he's not a
rapist
felon, sir. That was a
and a
complete witch hunt.
Russian
That
puppet.
was a complete witch hunt. I'm in New York, sir. That was a witch hunt. Everybody knows that. It was so
So tell me something, bud. Other than
it was so ridiculous, sir. You know how many dudes be having side chicks? It was so ridiculous, so
but you guys are the
ridiculous that
family
that
feud
actually
party.
the propaganda value turned towards the Republicans because the average person said this cannot be real.
Okay, you know what? I'm going to mute you here for a second here because I've got a funny feeling that you were up here just to ruin the show. So I'm going to have a few other people. If you want to come up on the board here, please invite yourself in. I'm hoping that somebody from our international audience will join
Sir,
in here
I'm
on the
not here to
show today.
ruin the show, sir. Just because I disagree with you doesn't mean I'm here to ruin the show. Just because I know more about my country and my president than you do doesn't mean I'm here to ruin the show.
Okay,
I
so
even
he's
conceded
not.
that he did some shady business stuff. If I was MAGA cult, I wouldn't have conceded that.
Yeah, so you had a guy who told you to shove bleach up your ass. You had a guy who is threatening to annex other countries. You have a guy that started a global tariff trade war that he
W
is
him.
right now had to pull back from because Mark Carney, our new Canadian prime minister,
Is that
basically
what you think, sir?
bamboozled him. That is a fact.
It is not a
Why did
fact,
he
sir.
pause tariffs again for 90
He
days?
he paused it because the country said they're coming to the table. What do you mean? Everybody knows that.
Why would Canada come to the table when we already were
Sir, do you not think
99% tariff free?
do you think the Canada does not need the United States?
No, actually, we don't.
That is some of the craziest shit I ever heard, sir. What would you have to spend on defense without us? Do you think
Nothing. Because
the
the only
reason
ones
nobody
we're worried
bothers you is
about
because
taking us
Canada is so
over are
strong, or
you.
because you're on the border of the United States?
Everything I've heard from you is a talking point that is basically breath
Rebut it
with
then.
no
Rebut it.
substance.
Rebut it.
We do not need your defense because the only ones that we are worried right now about taking us over or have been worried about taking us over for more than 100 years right now is you.
No, sir, we don't want you. I will say this. Do you have that same energy for the three girls that were kidnapped in 2017 by ISIS? Have you read the Quran? Do you
See,
understand the
these are all
threats?
just bullshit
They're
talking
not.
points,
They're not.
bud.
You just can't rebut them.
What does that have
Drop
to
me,
do
sir. That's a
with
win for
Trump?
me if you drop me.
What does that
I will
have to
say
do
this.
with Trump?
They're not BS talking points, sir. There's been 56,413 T attacks in the last 11 years in the name of Islam. In the same time period for Christianity, there's been under 1,000. So it's not me just fear mongering. I have numbers and data to back up what I'm saying. On top of that, the top 20 T groups,
Okay,
all
I'm going to
Islamic,
tell you
all
right
with
now.
one goal.
I'm going to
All
tell
with,
you right
let me
now,
land my
bud.
plane. Let me land my plane. All with
No,
one goal:
you've
to
been
destroy the
flapping.
West. That's it.
Okay, all you've done is flap your gums ever since you got on the show here. So sit tight for just a minute because everything you have run through are nothing but talking points. You started out with Politico, you started, and then you've bounced around with everything since then, and now you're down to Christianity and Muslim statistics. You're talking to an atheist. As far as I'm concerned, they're both bullshit, and one is just as
I'm an atheist
problematic
too, sir.
as the other one.
You're not understanding what I'm saying. You said Canada has no threats, and I'm explaining to you how there is an existential threat.
That requires a massive military. No, this is a
Yes,
sociological
100%.
threat.
If it's not
This
us,
is a
it's China. If it's not
social
us, it's
threat.
China. Which one do you want? If it's not us, it's China. Who do you want? America or China? Someone got to hold the buck, right? Someone got to hold the stick.
No, we've got the European Union. We've got
Oh my God,
Mexico.
sir!
We've got
Europeans
South
cannot protect
America.
themselves from Russia. The only reason Russia not attacking is because they don't want to start all-out war with the U.S. What are you
Russia.
talking about, sir?
Russia is pulling out
Sir, do you see what's
T-50.
going on
Yeah.
in Ukraine?
Okay. Yeah. Goodbye. Sorry, I've had enough. Goodbye. You're one of these paid disruptors, so I'm just going to see you go. Goodbye. Every one of those things was just an absolute bunch of bullshit. I think most of my audience understands that. If you are watching Prairie Princess, sorry, I've had enough of that. Welcome to the show.
Hi, how are you? I know, right? America
every
First says he
time
can't
I,
debate.
yeah, every
So
time
America
I
First
start a
says,
show, this happens. The very first person that'll
yeah.
want up in the box. I believe these are paid people that are set about uh, to do this crap with lives to distract, to avoid any type of serious conversation and mire these things down into basically BS talking points. So we can't actually hold a decent conversation.
No, I have to agree. America First says he can't rebuttal. Well, he's not letting anybody rebuttal. Every time you try to give him an answer, he switches to a different topic. I mean, Donald Trump wrote The Art of the Deal. The Art
Yep.
of the Deal is basically tells everybody how he does business and is and probably how he cheats in business, which is why New York won't let him do business in New York anymore and why he's a felon, which has nothing to do with the US government and everything to do with the fact that he is bad at business.
Yeah. Well, and that's, I've pointed this out on more than a few occasions. Like most people, if your little town or your city or your province produces someone that goes out and does well in the world, you're always going to hear, Canada's. Not that I want to use this one gross, but Canada for a long time, Wayne Gretzky. Everybody kind of has their thing. But the interesting thing that I never found is you never heard New Yorkers going, New York's own Donald Trump. Because they've been the ones dealing with this shady shit now for decades. They know exactly who and what he is.
Well, and the guy didn't bother to talk about the fact that January 6th was all about Republicans.
Yeah, yeah,
I don't recall Democrats wanting to crap in the White House or storm and break windows. Those were Republican supporting people. Those are people who supported Trump. To disrespect the Capitol and disrespect their own government was all Republican.
yep, yep. So if you're just joining in, welcome to the show. The show is Radicalized. If you'd like, invite yourself up to the box. I'm hoping that if you are part of our international audience, anywhere from other than North America, I hope you'll invite yourself up into the box. So Perry, I don't know if you caught what I was saying at the beginning, but I don't think that my guest there was a good example of that. But I honestly believe that there is a group out there that they haven't been brainwashed. They want this. They want change, even violent change if necessary, and often preferably. But anytime that we look at any sort of right wing dictatorship in history, there has always been a group that no matter how many atrocities you lay bare, they're still on that side. Uh, would you agree?
So before I say anything, the guy said that Trump can do business in New York, but in 2023, the judge ordered the termination of Trump state business licenses in New York. So no, he can't. Number two, my theory on what's going on is people are so scared that they just do not know how to get past being wrong. Like they're so scared since COVID of they've spent way too many years basically putting up a brick wall and protecting themselves that now it's kind of hard to resort back. Like it's almost like it became such a habit. They don't know how to be anything different, so they have to go out and search for something else. Today we're going to fight about Trudeau. Today we're going to fight about Carney. Today we're going to fight about business deals or his socks. Or, like they have to wake up, and the only way they can function is finding another thing to complain about. And the MPs and the conservatives have to keep their followers angry because that's the only way they can win an election. So it's all fear, and manipulation.
And I would absolutely agree. We know that few things motivate like fear. And fear has been used as a manipulation tactic and a subservience tactic all through history because it's effective at the end of the day. People do things that work. So the reality is that they're just holding up a time honored tactic of spreading fear and manipulation. Anybody who's watched me, I've often talked about the three R's, the things that people will unalive for en masse. That's your race or your region, resources, and religion. And religion is often used as a tool to gain resources.
Well, I think religion makes them, I think they use religion to think that they can't be bad what they're doing because they're religious. That's going to cover their tracks. And it's so obviously like not, because the rest of us are like actually using critical thinking and common sense, going, that is the opposite of what you're doing.
Well, and I've discussed this a lot about how these tactics work with the brain because, and again, I can't really say much about what I do for a living, but I deal with a lot of trauma response and understanding how much the amygdala can play part and part of our decision making process. And one of the things that the amygdala doesn't do very well is differentiate between a real threat and a perceived threat. And that's why social media is so utterly effective at spreading the fear message because it does two things really well: define and simplify the fear, and then put it on repeat.
Yeah. I've been learning more and more about I can't say the word amygdala, but it's quite fascinating because here's what I notice is people who are supporting the conservatives like Pierre and Trump, who are in Canada, the people I know personally, I know them to have low self-esteem, which I thought was interesting. And I don't know why, but it was just like you notice the people who are doing this. So they're looking for almost a club to be a part of to make them feel like important, or people that follow the same idea. It makes them feel like they're a part of something, but it just feels like some of the people that are Trump supporters in my town, um, they have low self-esteem.
Yep, yep. And one of the psychological issues that we have with this situation is that people with low self-esteem are looking for something that becomes their personality. And I believe that it's one of the reasons that religion continues to have a cyclical hold on humanity because we always have a part of our population that essentially they're not really looking for nuance. What they're looking for is simple answers to big questions. They can input these kind of into their personality, and it's all good. And then we can kind of move on from those big subjects and go on with our day. With a lot of other people, these components are part of their personality because they actually have a personality outside of that scope. And that's what I'm seeing so much with the religious factor, with the Trump factor, and all of these things, is that this is essentially a substitute for their personality because it is difficult for them emotionally, socially, intellectually to come up with a personality of their own.
I feel like I was raised very, very conservative. Father is very, very conservative, and narcissistic. And so I feel better knowing that when I'm talking about politics, when I found TikTok, I gained a following because I knew I was not being like him. I had my own voice and I was looking for the fact that truth made me feel important because I knew what I was talking about and I could debate people. And I know I've had low self esteem my whole life because of the family I was raised in. But it really did. up that when I was able to find TikTok on on the proper side, which is the side of facts and the side of critical thinking. And I don't know if it's boosted my self esteem, but I definitely like the fact that I can sit there and say, I'm not going to follow that. I can sit there and say, I'm not voting UCP, I'm not voting conservative, and I know damn well I'm not going to follow the crap. I'm actually going to use the brain I have and do the research I can to be on the proper side of politics.
And for myself, I think that one of the, I didn't start my TikTok career on the political side. But as I was watching things evolve, being, a little bit of a closet historian, uh, I look at a lot of things from our past, and the repetition of the past was what set off the alarm bells and started more of my journey into the political spectrum here because of exactly what I was seeing. Now, one of the troubles that we have with social media, as much as it becomes a platform for, you and I to connect on a more intellectual level, I've always said that one of the issues that we have with social media, if you have a village of 100 person, you have one village idiot. The village idiot is always going to stay in line because the numbers and the consensus just aren't on his side. However, if you have 100,000 groups of 1,000, all of a sudden you have a lot of village idiots, and they can all start talking to each other. Now they have numbers and solidification of whatever idea, and that's one of the issues with social media is no matter what idea you introduce, crazy as flat earth, doesn't matter what, the earth has a firmament, we didn't go to space, no such thing as dinosaurs, we didn't land on the moon. It doesn't matter what crazy topic that you introduce, there's going to be a bunch of people on social media going, I've been looking for a guy like you.
Yep, looking for a place to connect with somebody. The proper side of politics. The proper side of politics, in my opinion, is when you actually look at a politician and you go, this is what they've done, this is their record. I mean, I don't know how people follow Pierre because, like today, he's like, I look at behaviors. I love behavioralism. He's very soft spoken today. He was acting from his heart. He was passionate about the veterans. And then you go online because you know damn well there's veterans who are going to be mad at him because for 20 years, he's voted against veterans. And some of them online are really mad right now because they're like, F you. Where were you the past 20 years when you took our offices away, when you took our money away? Like, it's all a game because his behavior was so different than yesterday. Like the soft spoken and totally acting like he gave a shit, but yet there's so many people out there who believe him that he's the one who's going to save the veterans. But for 20 years, where was the guy? I don't want to vote for someone who is talking out both sides of his mouth. I want to know what you voted for. And if you voted against housing, I'm going to question that you actually give a crap about housing.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, 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 absolutely. I mean, the one of the troubles that we're having is so many people have forgotten that it doesn't matter what comes out of a person's gob. What matters is their actual actions, and I think so many of us have forgotten that. And with social media amplifying our voices, talking is all we need to do, and then it goes on repeat cyclically for days and days and days on end. So, Judy, you've been listening in. Welcome to the show. Can I get an age for legal reasons and a rough part of the world that you're from? Hello, Judy. Hello, Judy.
Oh, I guess she mistapped. So, just because I don't think I did, I'm 51 from Alberta. I have a question for you on what you think about this because yesterday, Pierre Poilievre talked about economics and said, well, you know, same old liberals, same old liberal MPs, same old liberal policies. And then 20 seconds later told us his economic ideas were referenced off Stephen Harper's 2008-2009 crisis that he dealt with. And I'm trying to figure out what Pierre's game is, because he can't be that stupid, because 2008-2009 was praised by Stephen Harper and Jim Flaherty to Mark Carney. So what is the game? Because he knows damn well Mark Carney was there doing that. So why would he be dumb enough to use that date, which basically compliments Mark Carney?
Because I think they know that nobody on their side is ever going to check anything. And systematically, that's exactly the problem. And that's why these, the 3-word slogans, because you're dealing with a crowd that just isn't, they're going to take these simple concepts and they're going to run with it. They have absolutely no inclination to delve further, to look into the truth, to see if there's more behind it, or to even remember, even if they lived through it, that that was the case when it happened. So I think so much of that happens just because of the sheer ignorance, and I'm not talking on a general level, but the sheer ignorance that that side of the crowd has toward investigating anything. And we all know that once kind of our algorithms are set up, those algorithms only pursue what we're after in the first place. So conflicting information simply doesn't enter the equation.
Well, it's interesting because their favorite line is, "You need to do more research," and it's like, but I brought the evidence in that TikTok that they're telling me to go do the research on, going, here are your receipts, but yet your only response is go do some research, and that's the only thing they ever say. They don't actually provide anything, and it's like they think because other people, they just want to make you look stupid as if you haven't done anything, but yet I'm wondering how people don't see that they're being stupid, because that video literally brings the receipts. And yet and I just shake my head so many times going, like my grandpa said, I have way too much common sense. So I have no problem looking things up. I have no problem doing the research, and common sense tells me, why wouldn't you?
Yep. Just in time. Welcome to the show. Can we get your rough age and what part of the world are you from?
Mid-50s from the west coast of Canada.
Welcome to the show, Justin. You've been listening in. What do you have to say?
Well, I listened to your words before about words and not actions, and the difference between Poilievre and Carney. And Poilievre's actions are well detailed. You look at what he's voted against. He's voted against everything that benefits the Canadian people. Those are actions. So it doesn't matter what he says now. It makes no difference what he says now. You just have to go look at his record. That's what he's done. And so you can't believe that this is what he's going to do if this is the record of what he has done in the past. You can't take him at face value, because there's no indication that that is his inclination. His inclination is to vote and behave the way that he has behaved for 20 years, versus Carney, who, in fact, as you recall, the economic crisis in 2008, shepherded this country, according to Stephen Harper and anybody else who had any intellect, in a way that actually had us to avoid all of the challenges that the rest of the world faced. Then went on to Britain and fixed their problem, and certainly advised against them leaving the European Union. They did anyways, but that wasn't his deal. He left before they left the Union anyways. But people try to tar him with that brush. So if you look at the actions of Carney versus the actions of Poilievre, what Carney is saying now is exactly what he has done. What Poilievre is saying now is exactly opposite to what he has done.
And there's evidence that Poilievre, because you can go online and look at voting records. You can go online and look at expenses. You can go online and see videos. I mean, you can see all of the evidence.
Yeah, but the problem is his crowd are validated by his slogans. That's what they like. Regrettably, they are less educated than those who can think through that slogan, but it validates them. It doesn't in the United States. The MAGA crowd's the same way. Trump validates them as individuals. Said you're valuable. We're going to win this thing, and it makes them feel powerful. That's why they're resistant to go look at any information that contradicts their validation.
And today, did you hear Pierre Poilievre once again say that Mark Carney is hiding from the media because we all know that Pierre is hiding, and yet I'm sitting there going, and I'm making comments on Twitter to literal MPs, the conservatives, going, do you think the people that follow you are that stupid that they wouldn't look on any social media or TV and see that there is a tariff meeting? Like, you can't tell me people are that stupid.
Unfortunately, many of them are. And if there's anybody that's hiding from the media, it is Poilievre, who takes 4 questions at any meeting or any appearance that he has. 4 questions only from selected media, and will not take any from the CBC at all. 0. Where Carney will take questions from anybody.
I have a story. So I went to a candidate forum yesterday, was it? And our area, and there's 2 things that happened. Number 1, it basically was a Pierre Poilievre speech. The guy from our area who's already won before basically repeated his speeches and never even talked once about what he was going to do in our area. And it was like, wow, he's using all of the slogans, the Canada First, the Lost Liberal Decade. And I'm basically one of 3 people in that entire room who probably will vote Liberal. The other thing I noticed is he was talking to a woman and about like the fact that Mark Carney did not properly get in. And I'm sitting in my chair and going, God, this is not the place I want to be right now. And the guy is basically saying no one in the history has ever done that. And I know damn well that's not true. So I spoke up and I interrupted them. And I said, what about, John Turner and Mackenzie King and that? Or no, I said Mackenzie King. I forgot the other guy's name. And then the MP said John Turner. And I'm sitting there going, holy crap, you just told the woman in the audience that Mark Carney is the only one, but then you just corrected me and reminded me of the other guy. So like a blatant lie right in front of everyone. And of course, nobody cared.
No, there's not a lot of discernment.
They will not. The validation to them of being validated by this party of anger and hate and fear is too great for them to give up for common sense and logic. They finally find validation in their world, because they've been powerless in their world for years. And part of that's a responsibility of the ruling party. They should find some way to provide or make these people feel more powerful than they feel themselves. But part of them is their own responsibility to get your shit, pardon me, together as a personal individual, that you don't have to be hoping mommy says, hey, you're a good boy today, to feel good about yourself. And functionally, that's what Poilievre's speeches do. It takes that approach with those individuals who've never felt like they were validated, validates them. And so it's almost impossible to talk them out of that from a logical perspective. That's the challenge that we have in Canada. Thank goodness there's only maybe 20% or 25% of our population, not 40% like there is in the United States.
This guy brought his kid to the forum and probably thinking that no one was going to challenge him at all. Probably not expecting me to walk in the room. And when I questioned him and said, so what are the Conservatives going to do about the decorum in the House of Commons? Because you yourself, sir, have been kicked out of the House of Commons for insults. And he got up there and proudly said, I did call Justin Trudeau a liar. And that whole room erupted in cheers. And I'm like, his kid is sitting right behind him. And I'm like, oh my God, I need to go home.
There's no price too high. That's the sad situation. There's no price too high for these people to try to grab onto their validation and hold on to it as if it is life itself. No price too high.
Harley Canadian, welcome to the show. Could I get your age and a rough location for you?
Saskatchewan, 57 years old.
Welcome to the show, Harley. You've been listening in. What do you have to say?
I agree with some of the things that a lot of people are saying in this chat. One thing is that I have noticed is people are very lazy or just basically wants to have a conflict in the world now, especially with our conservative party is using basically scare tactics, misinformation, everything like that is all simple. The reason why they're doing that is just they want to see more kind of arguments.
And Harley, what do you think? What do you think the end game of that is? I mean, what they're employing all of this, but what do you see as the end game of all of this?
It's just going to cause more hatred amongst each other in Canada. That's not a good situation at all. As it is, Canada should be conformed to each other, and all parties should be working with each other. Like she said, that basically back in the day, area representatives used to represent the area. Okay,
Yep.
and they used to help with the area's basically needs and wants, right? But that's right now, no. Most of the stuff that's going out there is all big parties issues. It's not even about the areas of Canada that wants improvement.
Yeah, I agree because I think our town could use, if our town would stop being so damn conservative, could use the accelerator fund and get some fourplexes up here because we have outside hospital care workers and outside teachers who are coming in, and we're at 1,000 people in a town. We have no fourplexes, apartments. We have nothing here, and I think we would do very well
Come on,
to have
subs.
that here.
Yeah, that's something that so without getting into too much of where I live, I'm just going to say that the town I live in, I always wondered how and why the town stagnated. Like there was almost like a 40-year era where nothing really seemed to change. There was constant pressure for new housing. There was constant pressure for new apartments. There was constant pressure for people to move to the area. And yet the last thing that seemed to be on anybody's plate was actually building homes. And yet, in the last 10 years now, what I've seen is all of a sudden this massive uptick in exactly the type of things that you're talking about, multiplexes, apartments, and things like that. So I think it's changing, but I think it's really dependent on where you're actually coming from. So, Kimmy, welcome to the show. Could I get an age for you, please, for legal reasons, and roughly where you're from in the world?
I have a question for the group. Have you guys noticed that basically younger people can't even have a relationship anymore and they're not building family nests or nest eggs? When you're usually in a family unit, then both people would work on getting a home. As it is, if you're single, it's so hard.
I think I think the younger generation, part of their frustration is they see it exactly for what it is. Uh, they've looked at 3 generations of us basically tanking and taking, and they're looking now going, what the hell is left? So, am I surprised that we're seeing this exodus of young males into the red pill movements, into right wing movements? No, I'm not really particularly surprised at all. Because if you're a 20-year-old looking at the world in front of you, what the hell options do you have? It's not like you can go to a company nowadays and work for that company for 40 years, get a living wage and holidays and time off and all of this stuff and a nice retirement at the end. That's not available to them anymore, where it always has been. So, like, as far as the young generations coming up, they're peed off, and I don't particularly blame them.
I don't disagree with that. The RP off. Development in Canada has stagnated for so many years that basically New innovation corporations were never developed for Canadians themselves. Um, as I seen, like in the Harper years, these guys don't realize that most of our public services were sold off into private sectors. Private sectors always wanted banking roles from the government. And that's one of the reasons why the oil companies are always demanding for extra money to actually do their work. Because the reason why is they don't want to spend their own money.
Yep. No, fair enough. Just give me a moment here. If you're just joining in, welcome to the show. I am your host, Mr. Radical. The show is Radicalized here every Saturday, 6 o'clock Mountain, 8 o'clock Eastern, here on the Beaver Network. Sharing is caring, tapping is clapping. If you're just joining in, if you're from another part of the world that isn't North America, I'm hoping that you'll invite yourself up into the guest box. We'd love to get an international flavor. And the conversation is devolving a little bit, but I want to bring it back a little bit to what I originally started talking about, is that we're losing the young people into this system because of the frustration and essentially the hopelessness that they currently feel, because they don't really see a light at the end of the tunnel. And one of the things that I think on the left that we've failed to show people is what is the light at the end of the tunnel. We don't actually offer anything. And I think that's one of the main differences between the strategy between the two sides. Now, you can ridicule the Make America Great Again movement as much as you want, and we all do, and rightfully so. However, for that side, this simplifies the equation down into one solid, stable track forward. Make America great again. The details don't matter. We're making America great again. But what do we on the left say? And I think it's a problem.
Well, it is a big problem. You have to look at the left side is basically looking at, well, you guys have basically tied up everything into corporations. You brought in computers to take over jobs. So how can you're denouncing the human race to even have a chance to work, right? And like a lot of these young people don't even get that opportunity to have an interview because they have done this.
Yep. And this is something that I've been advocating for, is systematically we need to change how we work and operate in the world. The capitalist system, the tribalist system, we continue to do these same things over and over and over again without understanding that the system itself is fundamentally the problem, that we have to view ourselves as a global species. However, whenever you mention globalism to a part of this crowd, they lose their minds because they're so devolved into that tribalism, into that sense of identity that they get from the tribalism, that seeing ourselves as a world species, that we live on a planet with a 99% extinction rate, that it is us against the universe. It shouldn't be us against us. It is awfully difficult to break that idea down to this crowd, that they need to see humanity as a single entity, not Russians, Chinese, Americans, Canadians.
It's not slander.
So if you're just joining in, if you're from our international audience, if you're not from North America, I'd love if you invite yourself up to the box. Remember, sharing is caring, tapping is clapping. And tonight we're kind of discussing that, how do we approach a certain percentage of our population that will agree with all of the worst ideology because they simply don't have the tools to live a life full of gray areas. And that, unfortunately, in liberalism is one of our confounding ideas with that side of the political spectrum, is that everything has gray areas. But we are talking to a crowd that simply can't comprehend and won't comprehend, and even violently so, will not comprehend gray areas. Carly?
I would agree with that statement. They don't want to actually see the whole picture of the world. They just want to see the picture that they are in.
I will have to agree because I went to that forum and somebody there said they have like decades, hardcore conservative, and they were spewing conspiracy theories. And I'm thinking, you're older than me. You were there during like the past 50 years. Like, it's almost like you said, being conservative is their whole personality. They don't know how to change. Where I'm one of those people where I voted conservative for 20 years. I voted NDP. I have voted liberal. I am not connected to one damn party. But the people who are will fight tooth and nail because they don't know how to say this isn't working. I mean, we have two parties now who are probably going to lose their leaders. And my guess is going to be Pierre and Singh. And
Yep.
they need to reinvent their party because it's going downhill. It's not like conservatives have gone so far right because they keep losing elections. They lost being conservatives.
Well,
Well,
and they
that
have
kind of
to. I'll get to you in a second there, Harley. They have to embrace that ideology because something that I call the teeter-totter effect of human personalities. You're not going to find this in a psychology book. It's just an example that I use with people. The reality is, for most of us human beings, equilibrium is actually a really, really difficult thing to achieve. Most of us are either going like this or right down like this. And once we kind of subscribe to a particular way, we're either heading up or heading down. We're going to ride or die with that sentiment. And returning us back to that equilibrium actually becomes really difficult and really hard to maintain in a lot of people's personality and in their lives.
As a balanced person, I can actually see that you're correct in that aspect. I never voted for one party either. I'm a person that basically looks for the best people to represent.
Hey,
Hey, I,
I'm
I,
undecided, so can you guys fucking change, like, help me decide on which party to pick?
Mac, can I welcome to the show here, Mac? Can I get your age, please, and a rough location just for legal purposes for the show?
I'm 33 and I'm from Saskatchewan.
All right, Mac, welcome to the show. Younger perspective, that's great. So you've been listening in and you're asking which party to vote for, and I guess the question has to be, what are you looking for out of your government?
Fucking help us get down. Don't fuck.
Okay, well, then you're probably going to want to vote Liberal. Next, sorry, Mac, I don't mean to kid you here, but the reality is if you have any sort of concern about the average person in our system, I think right now the choice is extremely clear. The Conservative Party, we already know for a fact that India helped install Pierre Poilievre. For the last 30 years, every single time that a conservative government has set foot in our government as the official party, they have stagnated economies, sold off Canadian government assets for pennies on the dollar, and made huge cuts to social programs, medical, all of these things that people depend on a day-to-day basis. These are the first things that the Conservatives will chop. It's the first thing that they've gone after every single time. And I think if you take the time out and the bother to go look at Pierre Poilievre's actual voting record, you will see exactly what he stands for and what his party stands for. So I guess again, it goes back to the question of what are you looking for out of your government? Because if you're looking for
Definitely not Pierre Polyev. Like, I'm native and fuck Pierre Polyev, man.
Can I just say, if you're wanting a perfect example, so the Accelerator Fund program is a housing program that is a grant program that municipalities can apply for. And if municipalities get grant money from the federal government, they're not going to need to go to their provincial government as much as they do now to get housing going. So it's a second option for them. Pierre Polyev not only told his MPs not to apply for it. So the people who won in the ridings have to go back to their ridings and say, you voted for me to help you with housing, but my boss told me to stop. Then threw their names under the bus and told us he's going to get rid of the housing program, which means the provinces now need to support the housing more for municipalities. And then the other day just laughed and mocked Mark Carney for wanting to actually increase the money for the Accelerator Fund. To me, that doesn't make any sense. Why are you getting rid of a program that's going to take some of the pressure off provinces and take pressure off municipalities so they can get housing going? So you support housing, but you're taking away one of the best opportunities for municipalities to gain housing.
Yep, I agree. Jay, welcome to the show. Could I get your age and a rough location for you?
Yeah, 35 in Eastern Ontario.
Welcome to the show, Jay. You've been listening in, so what's your thoughts on all this?
See, what I'm going to say is going to sound very cynical, and maybe a teeny bit flippant, but it's not. I know you guys want to vote Liberal. I actually don't think there's very good options all around, and I do believe in what's called accelerationism. And I do feel like it's better for the Liberals to win because it's going to push Canada to a head much faster. And something's got to give. Like, I do think the Liberals will be bad for Canada, but I will vote for them because it will accelerate things ultimately, either with like a Western separation or, you hear people, like I spend a lot of time in Quebec and, the past 4 or 5 years, you hear so much more talk about separation than you ever did before. And I think ultimately that's best because the political sides can't really, you're not going to be able to bridge the gap. It's only going to get wider. Ultimately.
How do you figure that we can't bridge the gap? Explain to me first in detail, what's the gap?
I think that's a great question. I think partially it's cultural. When I grew up, it took me until I'm embarrassed to say this, but it took me until my late 20s, early 30s to even understand that Canada would basically be a second world country if it wasn't for our natural resources in the West. That was unheard of. It was, it was kind of, the West was kind of scoffed at. It was like, oh, Alberta, Saskatchewan, whatever. Oh, the oil and gas. People kind of laugh about it without realizing that it's basically what prevents us from being a second world country. There's really no respect for that. And
there's hang on though. There's no mineral resources in Newfoundland. There's no mineral resources in Ontario or Quebec.
Who said that?
Well, but
Alberta alone, I think it's 20% of our export GDP. Just Alberta.
No, oil and gas is 3.5% of our current GDP. Oil and gas isn't the player that Albertans want to make it out to be.
Well, okay, let's just say it is that. I still think culturally we can't bridge that gap. And it's better if the Liberals win because it will accelerate that divide, and ultimately the divide needs to happen.
Okay, so explain what culturally is different between, because I live in the West, And I have family that lives in the East. So explain to me what the cultural divide is between the two.
Well, ultimately, it's the difference between maybe progressivism and uh, and maybe some classical liberalism, but not much anymore. You really don't hear or know many classical liberals. It's progressivism.
Okay.
Um, Liberalism, you just don't really hear. Even conservatives. I mean, a
Okay.
lot of conservatives in like in Ontario, they sorry, go ahead.
When you say progressivism, what do you mean by progressivism? So we're
Like
all
they,
working with the same definitions here.
yeah. Well, it's basically an offshoot of. I mean, again, I'm not saying this to progressivism is not Marxism, but it has its roots in Rousseau and Hegel and a lot of the beliefs, uh, that kind of spurred from the French Revolution, right?
Okay,
And
you're
you mean more
talking about
practical things,
you're
or
talking about economic systems, not social systems. So what does one have to do with the other?
well, I'm just saying they bleed into each other.
Okay.
Like they're
Well,
not separate. Like I'm not saying they're separate. Like I understand what you're saying, but they're not separate. I mean,
okay. So how is that bleeding into what's happening with the West?
well, you don't have as much of a progressive outlook in the West in places like Saskatchewan and Alberta. You do, I guess, in the cities and stuff, but outside
Okay.
of that, no.
What do you think scares the average Albertan? And I spent 15 years in Alberta. What do you think the average Albertan is scared of when you say progressing?
Well, it's a big umbrella. I mean, I can jump into some of it, but
Give me the top three.
well, in Canada, I would say I mean, part of it has become a lot of the climate stuff, you know. Um, there's the cultural stuff as well, which is more like I mean, people use the word woke as a pejorative, but I mean, you don't have to use it as that. It's just that's part of it. And then there's like the classic part of it, which is just more government control, right? And a lot of conservatives don't want that. They want less. Although, I mean, most conservatives are in a way, progressives now. I mean, in Ontario, we have a conservative party that is actually called the Progressive Conservative Party. It's like an oxymoron name. Like it
Yeah,
doesn't even make any sense because progressivism is antithetical to conservatism.
yeah.
So
Well,
that's
the
how
the
that's how
piece.
scrambled Canadians are with this stuff. Like we can't even get our ideologies straight.
Okay, so what now? You meant that's your big three. So I've got to ask you though,
Yeah, yeah.
what is the issue with progression in and of itself?
Well, progress. Progressivism is not progress. Like they're
How so?
they're entirely different terms. Like I'm talking about the ideology. I'm not talking about, oh, I'm making progress on something.
Yeah. However, but you're saying that that progressive stance that you have progressive conservatives. So, what is the issue that we should stagnate under a regular conservative? Because when I hear you say that we are conservatives, what I hear is stagnation. Because in the last 30 years in Canada, every time we put conservative governments into power, that's what we have gotten is stagnation.
Well, I mean, I'm not doing this to be disagreeable, but I do disagree with the premise of your question because I mean, the past 10 years have not been great in Canada.
Okay,
There's been a lot of
specifically,
issues.
okay, there it is.
Yeah,
Specifically, how?
okay, let's take just any topic.
The big one.
Okay, well, I
Specifically,
mean,
how is Canada fundamentally different today than it was 10 years ago?
okay, the increased crime, Bill C-75, the reform bail laws, You know, like we had like my cousin's roommate in in the GTA. I don't remember exactly where, but he and his buddies were assaulted by somebody, and they found out that he had been released having assaulted somebody. I think it was less than a week before. You know,
Okay, how is
you
that
hear
the
about
liberal
stories all
government's
that.
how is that the liberal government's problem because a court let him go too early?
Okay, but do you know about Bill C-75?
Okay, tell me what's the problem with Bill C-75?
It was basically bail reform, and like it's what the Toronto police force has been kicking up a stink about. You
Okay,
know, but regardless, I think, like I said, my thought on the election is that I think it's a better thing that the Liberals will win, because I think these things
okay.
will
So
accelerate.
I gotta ask you a question, Jay, and then I
Yeah,
gotta
yeah,
get the
please.
rest of the panel back in here.
Yeah,
Uh, here's the trouble
I
that
only have a few minutes, but
yeah, here's
thanks
the trouble that
for
I
letting
have
me
with
talk.
part of your here's the trouble that I have with part of your stance
Yeah,
is
yeah.
you guys cannot, as social parameters collapse, which is what we have been having, and most of our provinces are run by conservatives. 80% of the rules that you follow in a day are run by your provincial province. Okay. So, if you're looking, most of our provinces are run by the conservatives. Yes, the federal government has been there for the last 10 years. But the trouble is most of the things that you guys tend to complain about on the right are provincial matters that are under the jurisdiction of the Danielle Smiths, the Doug Fords, the Scott Moes.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
You're
Continue.
talking about
I'm listening.
crime, but all of these things are provincial matters. So, Harley, I wanna get you back in on the. Actually, Miss Radical.
Well,
I'm
I
sorry, I
really
kind of left you out.
appreciate. I felt forgotten. Thanks for asking me. I wonder, when I'm hearing Jay speak, first I get really angry and a little bit triggered because I think this is an exact representation of America and those bro boys that have done everything to burn down the system. They don't really care about their neighbors or their families or friends. It's all about their anger and what they want to do to, like, it's not unique. It's dangerous. And I wonder who hurt them that they have to like go to this level to want to burn it all down.
What's burning down?
Well, that's like you're basically saying you want the liberals to win, so it will anger everybody enough to
No.
take everything down. Is that what I heard? Because that's what I'm pretty sure
You're. I
you
think
said.
you're. I get. You know. I'm gonna try not to put words in your mouth, but
Well, I'm telling you what I
I'm not
heard.
looking at
So
it
this is your point to correct it.
right. Like I'm. I would say I'm very lucky. You know, I'm worried about younger people and my kids and stuff like that. Like I was, fortunate because my business was able to take off in the early 2010s, and I've done all right for sure. I don't want people to suffer, but what I do see is
But you
an
don't want them to
unbridgeable.
flourish.
There's not a bridgeable gap here. Like
But
it's
you don't
not
want them to
bridgeable.
flourish.
Who?
Anyone.
Why?
Like you're
What?
thinking
What?
about you and your kids. Like you've got you and your kids on the forefront, but that's it.
Who said
So,
that? Who said that I only had my
I
kids?
thought you said you
Again,
were worried about
I'm
your
not putting
kids.
words in your mouth.
You said you were worried about
The
your kids.
gentleman whose live this is, I didn't put words in his mouth. He
The
didn't put
gentleman
words
is
in
my
mine.
husband.
Oh,
Okay,
you
The
well,
did.
gentleman is my
Hang on,
husband.
though, Jay.
Just
I got
answer
to
the
back you up
question.
on this one, Jay, because what you said is you want the liberal government in because
yes,
it's going to accelerate
Yes.
the changeover. So
Yes.
based on that statement, that is like I'm waiting for him to burn it to the ground kind of a statement, where we're looking at the situation going, it's not going to be
No,
much different at the end of the Liberal term than it is today. So we're not sure
no,
what this
again,
big
like but
divide
again,
is.
you guys are allowed to think that. That's fine. And you can impugn my motives if you want. I can't control what you guys, project. But what I'm just saying is that, I think cooler heads would prevail in that scenario, and there would be, there's an ability to, figure something out so that, there is a separation that would create a little bit more harmony. Like as bad as it is south of the border, one of the things that their founders did sort out, which was states' rights, and one of the reasons a lot of Canadians misunderstand states' rights. But when you go state to state, there's such a huge difference in personality, people, cultural practices, and stuff. Like, I mean, maybe not extreme to an outsider, but if you talk to them, and that's why they were so big on states' rights. And I think when you have such a large swath of people with, increasingly polarized views, a more harmonious end to that is something like this. It's not forcing your will on everybody else and making them believe what you believe and forcing them through,
But isn't
elections.
that what the Republican Party does?
No, I'm not. I'm not talking about today. I'm just saying, like the founding fathers, the reason why states were set up to be and have the powers that they do, like because they're, I think, more. Well, they are more powerful than individually against the federal government than provinces are against our federal government. I'm not. Anyway, I'm not talking about the U.S. today. I'm just kind of giving an example of how
Yep, no, I understand.
a way to bridge that gap
But
and to
again,
have.
you're talking about this massive gap, and I'm still trying to figure out what is this gap that is so indivisible right now, that you're
Okay.
willing to separate and try and separate out of Canada.
Well, I think when it comes to natural resources, there's a huge gap there. Again, like that's what I learned like when I was in school. There was zero respect
Where
or
did you go to
really
school, Jay?
education
Jay, where did you go to school?
in Ontario.
Oh, okay.
I went to public, which is my kids are not going to public anymore. Um, but there are some great public schools. I know some great public school teachers, by the way.
Sure.
It varies throughout the province, right? Like but yeah, I'm not like I mean, if you think I sound like a burn it all down person because I believe a little bit in accelerationism, it's not because I want like a war. It's because,
Well, what do you think it's going
again,
to gain? What do you think
one
it's
of
going to
the,
gain?
well,
I think Jay is more talking about, by any means, is that he believes that the Liberal Party has a better idea of how to move forward.
yeah, I wouldn't go
And
that far. I think in some ways, yes. Like I was excited when Carney came into the picture. I was really disappointed to see a lot of the people who've been around and making a mess for 10 years were capped. Like that was really disappointing.
Like who?
Um, well, Stephen
Just
Guilbeault.
curious. I'm not challenging you on that. I'm really
Yeah, no,
curious.
Stephen Guilbeault would be another one.
Okay.
The housing minister, they've kind of swapped around. Was it that guy, Sean?
John Fraser.
Okay,
Uh,
Jerry, I gotta ask you a question. So,
yeah,
you're pretty up on all of the scandals from the liberal side. However, I'm watching Scott Moe use the notwithstanding clause to circumvent laws in Saskatchewan. I'm watching Danielle Smith fork over billions of dollars of taxpayer money to oil and gas companies while neutering progression in her province. I'm watching Danielle Smith more worried about whether or not Trump is going to get in than what's happening with her constituents and the fact that she's embroiled in a scandal with the healthcare system.
Oh, yeah,
So
and don't forget
when
Scott Moe also, he's been really dismissive towards like a lot of environmental stuff in the province. Like he's been very dismissive on a lot of
okay,
things.
so
He's
Jay, do
kind of just
you
brushed it off.
yeah, so Jay, do you believe in climate change?
Yeah, I don't like the term because it's a dumb term. Like
Okay.
it's, the climate changes. It's obviously like I don't want to call it a propaganda term, but it's a stupid term, right? Like when it's like avoiding picking whether things are warming or cooling. It's kind of like, okay, well, if things aren't going to cool, then we're going to say it's warming. Now it's not warming. We're just going to call it climate change so we can call it everything.
Okay. Uh,
I believe in man-made impacts to the environment.
okay, that was my next
Of
question. So
course.
you do believe that we have an impact on the
Yeah,
environment,
I just
right?
hate the
Okay.
term because it's like a low. I again, it's no offense to people who use it. Most people don't even because it's just in the popular vernacular. But the term itself it's a stupid term, right? Like I mean, the climate changes. Like it's a dumb term. Do you believe in climate change? Like yes, I believe that the climate changes, and I believe that if I dump out oil onto a lawn or a tree, it's going to kill it. Like, you know what I mean? It's climate change is just, it's more just, do we have an impact on the environment? Do humans have zero impact? Obviously not. How much? I mean, I do think that's up for debate to a certain level. Again, though, this is actually a topic about bridging the gap. When I just say, like what I just said to you, like you're not freaking out at me or anything like that. But if you say that in front of some liberals or some conservatives, they freak out. Say, no, there's no such thing as climate change. There's no impact. And then you say it on the other side is, oh, you don't believe in climate change. You don't believe in my religion. Like there's no, you know what I mean? Like there's
Do you
that
think
in
it's
between.
because we've been spending so much time rage baiting and gaslighting each other for the past, maybe since 2016, 2014, 2016, where the only kind of conversation is like somebody gaslights constantly. And so people are so quick to defend, to fight, to stand up because it's just such ridiculousness a lot of the
You're
time.
you're probably I don't know, you know what I mean? You just asked an incredible question that I don't want to give away like part of my jobs. Like I'm an investor, but I also have another business that I've worked in for a long time. And I've seen some of the stuff that you've said front
Mm-hmm.
row for a long
Me?
time because sorry,
Me or Radical?
sorry, the one who I wasn't looking at the screen. I didn't know who was talking, but who mentioned about like how things have been since 2016 or
Yeah.
That's me. Okay,
okay.
just for curiosity, yeah.
Well, the reason why I think it's such a great question is I actually don't think there's an easy answer to figuring it out. I've had a front row seat view of, again, in one of my careers of, having been brought up with the internet when I was young, for better or for worse, and then seeing move into social media and everything you just talked about. And I do think it's a huge problem, you know, and I couldn't tell you what to do about it because you're right. People are getting more and more polarized because of it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's not that nuance. Like, just take again, you guys haven't freaked out at me for what I said about climate change. But if you write that out, say on some social media website, what I said, depending on the group that you're talking to, you get flamed for, and you get labeled either, by a conservative that you're a left wing nut, or by the far left, you get called like a climate denier. I mean, what's
Can I
climate
tell
denier? It's
you?
like,
Can I tell you a little story, Jay? In I think it's about 2012, somewhere in 2012, I had a business in my hometown, and I chose Facebook to use to grow that business in my town for advertising. And one of
Okay.
the things Facebook offered me when I opened up my business account was I could buy bots. And not a lot of people had heard about it at the time. Not a lot of people were talking about it all the time. I could just buy bots. And I could buy a lot of bots. And so I would kind of like, I'm a small business owner. I'm just desperate to try to grow my business.
Yep.
Facebook is offering me $50 and I can buy 50 bots. And 50 bots are going to talk about my little store, and everybody's going to send that out. So the 50 bots go out, I pay for it the next day, and I've got calls from California wanting to buy my furniture. I've got bots that I can program to say and do any single thing I want. And that went on for about 2014. Okay. And then in 2014, the Facebook changed. The way the model of Facebook changed for a little bit. And it was only for about 4 months, maybe. And every post you got a point value. Every post
I remember
had
very
a,
well. Yep.
and at the time, I remember seeing a monetizer coming out of a Facebook meeting, and one of the reporters stuck the mic in and they said, "What did you learn from this monetization? Like, how much money is Zuckerberg going to break? What's going to happen?" And he said, "I can't tell you that, but here's what I'm going to tell you. I'm going to go home today, and my family is never going to be allowed on social media again after this meeting." I
Yep.
think I was a part of a test project with those bots. And I
Yep.
think I was being tracked by my comments, what I said, how I responded, so that when we rolled into this political spectrum that we're under, they almost know what we're going to say. They can attach bots to my account that are just going to keep me arguing in a cycle with me.
Yeah. I know exactly what you mean.
I
You
think
tell
just
somebody else that, they think you're crazy.
Now, Jay, I
That's
want to ask you a
that's
question.
definitely happening.
Mm.
Jay, I want to ask you a question. Do you believe that green technology will eventually supplant most oil and gas usage?
Oh, geez, I'm not qualified to answer that. I mean, I hope so. That would be great, but who knows? It's not something I know about, man.
All right,
I
Harley.
appreciate the question, though.
Harley, I want to get Harley back in the conversation too here, but Jay, I will say one thing: the climate thing is a touchy subject with the conservative side, and I understand
It's touchy with both sides, man.
it's touchy with both sides. Yeah, the trouble that I have with the conservative side is at this point here, we can't even convince them that it could be part of the equation, like we're seeing in Alberta with Danielle Smith, because essentially green technology is pretty much banned in Alberta right now. And consequently, it's also the only province that's having rolling blackouts.
Right. I mean, Texas also tries to put the boot on the neck of green technology, but I mean, it's actually one of green technology's success stories because it's so companies are so free to build down there that the government actually hasn't been able to stop it. It's actually interesting. It's in it's Ezra Klein's new book. I saw an interview with him. I can't remember what podcast it was, but he dives into it. It's really interesting. You might find that interesting. But I will say though, I don't know any conservatives who don't think the environment matters and that their man has an impact. Like I don't know that person. You
Yeah.
know, I know you say
Well,
Danielle Smith,
I'm
but
gonna
like I'm sure she has mentioned something. I'm not.
No, I'm gonna throw this out there just for your own edification and knowledge here, and then
Yeah,
I'm gonna
yeah.
go to Harley, and then Sparkle
Well,
and
you've
Shine.
given me a lot
Welcome to
of
the
your
show.
time. I appreciate it. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I appreciate that you came to us with a sensible approach and a calm approach, and that's what we want this show to be about. But ultimately, I think the green equation is something that has been actively suppressed by oil and gas ever since the 70s. We've found out recently that their own climate data matched exactly what other climate data was saying. And oil and gas has been sitting on this knowledge that they're affecting the environment since basically the 70s. So, Harley, I'm going to get you back in. And what do you think about all this?
Well, first of all, Jay, using the words climate change does not actually express what we're trying to do. First of all, it is environmental protection. They should be
Yes,
using those
exactly.
terms a lot more
Yes.
than
Yes.
anything else. But
Yeah.
the thing is when you get a person stating climate change, they think that the person is basically out to attack.
Yeah.
Right? So as that is now, as this world is going to, and then I'm going to go back a little bit because you were asking about what's the difference from Eastern Canada and Western Canada. Okay, Eastern Canada has a higher population and a higher aspect of basically manufacturing, finished products, stuff like that. So people have jobs out there. In Western Canada, you have basically farmers. You have cities with some production, but it's not as detailed as basically as Ontario. Ontario has always been in control of Canada due to the population. But in Western Canada, we don't have a high population, but we have all the resources.
Yeah.
Sparkle and Shine, welcome to the show.
Hello, how's everybody tonight?
We're good. How are you?
Doing good, doing good. Just you were talking about Danielle Smith and forest fires and stuff like that, and like I'm in Alberta, so this is like the hot seat, next to BC. We're next on the list, right? And like years ago, lightning strikes would happen, ATVs in the backwoods would, sparks and stuff like that, and it wouldn't cause province-wide forest fires. They'd be small fires, easily put out, ta-da, life goes on. Now, any little thing, the province is so dry that it's tinder dry and everything goes up, right? So, I mean, that it in itself is things are changing. Whether you call it climate change, global warming, whatever you want to call it, things aren't the same as they used to be. So the deniers are just basically they have their head in the sand.
Well, in my area here, we're talking about another dry season.
Hmm.
Even though the reservoir is full, so like our water base is where it should be. It's the snowpack in the hills that isn't really there, and that's where the major concern is. The waterways are full, everything else is dry. And I've lived in this area with a few years exclusion since the mid to late 70s, and it was never like that around here. The last fire that I remember in this area that was even remotely worrisome for the town was almost 30 years ago.
Hmm. Hmm.
The last couple of years, it's almost a yearly event.
Yeah, exactly, and we never get that snowfall and that snowpack back to where it can replenish anything. And when we do get rain, it's followed by a lot of sun and a lot of wind, especially like I'm talking Alberta here, where it just dissipates again.
Yeah.
You can have 3 days of rain, and then the winds come in, and it just you can feel the prairies drying out again. So it's a sad situation.
Well, I've seen reports where they're talking about within the next 20 to 30 years that Alberta is going to be looking at a massive water crisis. And I think a lot of the gaming politics that we are seeing with the Republican side and worldwide is because they understand that we're at the point where the environment is decelerating quickly. The impacts will begin in the next 10 years to affect everybody on a yearly basis. It isn't just going to be one massive storm crashing into the East Coast, it's going to be four of them. It's going to be five of them. Those storms are going to extend further into the mainland. We're going to see more tsunamis, more cyclones, more tornadoes. We're going to see all of these events where the ability for anybody to deny that we're having an impact is going to be gone. And I personally believe that a lot of this change of toward authoritarianism is because these higher ups have had the same data that we have had now for roughly, like I said, 40 to 50 years. And the reality is they know that there is a rough collapse point for our environment as far as it being able to support the population that we currently have.
And my suspicion is that all of the major oil and gas companies, and like I said, this is my suspicion, is that they have a plan B. They have some sort of environmental knowledge that, you know, green energy that they could roll out if they wanted to. I think they have a plan B. I think they know more than they're letting on, and they have plans in place to ready themselves. You know, when the inevitable happens, but they want to keep us as addicted to oil and gas as possible and milk as much as they can out of it. And I think they also don't want to admit that they were wrong and that they've been lying.
Well,
Is that what you really think it is? It's just like them lying?
yes, absolutely, unequivocally. As I mentioned, Jay, they've had the same climate data that everybody else had since the 70s, and their climate data showed the exact same transitions as we burned fossil fuels as everybody else's did. What they did is they
No,
hid their.
I did. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. But I was going to say, I agree with, like, I understood what you mentioned that earlier, and I don't disagree with the knowledge, but I mean, the reality is that, oil and gas have lifted like so many people around the world out of poverty. At the same time, we're investing tons of money into green energy. Like, there's no, at least in the Western world, there's no talk of that going away, completely. It's going to continue.
Yep.
And even some people who are in green energy, they actually, they're not afraid of lower prices in oil and gas because they said it will help actually accelerate their ability to make the transition. So I think it's happening,
It is
but
happening
the
because
rest of the world relies on oil and gas, and you can't take that away without mass starvation, right?
no, but no one's talking about instantly pulling it. What we're talking
Yeah,
about is a transition that sees us have an actual goal and a deadline, something that humanity has completely and utterly refused to do because the oil companies hold too much sway in the political and social systems. So of course
but even if we did, we'd have no impact because of China, right?
But hang on here. China's an interesting thing because China just the other day completed another high speed, non oil and gas electric train. So the reality is that China spends more on green technology than the entire West combined. Do they use oil and gas? Yes, unequivocally. However, they are also probably half a generation to almost an entire generation ahead of the West on green technology.
Yeah, but they have like over 1,000
Sure,
coal-fired plants.
sure. They also have a
That's a
hundred.
huge part of their
Yep,
energy.
but they also have 150,000 miles. I think. I don't quote me on that number. It's the one that's popping. They also have like 150,000 miles of high-speed train. We can't even connect Calgary and Edmonton with a high-speed train on flat fucking ground.
And that's because of scared investment into green energy,
Yep.
right? Every oil companies and stuff like that have already established over how many years is numerous, right? So they're scared to go from oil or coal to something like electricity that is done by wind, and they don't know the cost. They don't know the final cost of the changeover. So they don't really want to invest in something that they don't have a definition of how much it's actually going to cost them.
Yep. Sparkle and shine.
Right, but I mean, tons of gas companies have heavily invested in green energy. Like it
Which
was
ones?
that the one like it was that Total Energies in Europe and BP. They were, I think Total Energies is actually aiming to be a top renewable energy producer by like 2035 or something. And then Shell and BP have all their stuff. Like they're going to find ways to make money off of this. That's just how the market works.
Oh yeah, they're
Like
going to find
there's
money off of it, but that doesn't mean that they don't have that technology in their pocket right now. They're going
a
to
lot
drop
of them do though.
it
Like
again.
you Google, I've read stuff like tons of stories over the years, like BP, Shell, and I said that European company Total Energies. They have tons of investments in green energy,
Yes, but
and then I think even some of them have like massive, uh, like not subsidies. I don't know if it's grants they give out, and they invest in tons of these small startup companies too. Like they're not going to miss out on the green energy boom. That's just not how it works.
But the trouble is, Jay, that I have with it is we have seen an active participation from oil and gas to either buy out, bury, or illegalize any type of green technology that is going to challenge oil and gas's position. We have
Like
all
in
sorts
Alberta, you mean, or BC?
across the globe. I'm talking about in the last two generations. We know that oil and gas has actively tried to shut down any type of green technologies. So my belief
I'm
is,
sure. I don't doubt that some of them have tried. I don't disagree with you, by the way. But I'm just saying, if you like, just take some of the companies I've named, you're going to see like they're massively invested
sure,
in green energy, and they
sure.
will probably if anybody tries to stop them from pursuing that, they will crush them. You know what I mean? Because they're going to get ahead, and they want to be leaders in green energy.
They want to have the control first. If they don't have any control, then they're not going to be able to say they're successful. You have to understand that the oil companies and stuff was the first wave of basically everything. But as an
Yes.
electron, as electricity or and green energy and all that, it really hasn't took enough impact saying they can be in control.
Okay. Sure. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's great that we've had it, and now it's time to start, and we have started transitioning away. You know, so I think that's a good thing.
But Jay, I guess the question that a lot of us on the left have is, why has this been delayed for so long? I mean, we had solar panels on the White House in the 70s, and it looked like we were actually starting, and yet what we saw over the 80s is the direct control of oil and gas and a lot of these shadow corporations over the government as soon as it looked like we were heading toward and out of the oil and gas culture. So my firm belief is what we've seen is an active suppression of advancement of green technologies and the ability of
I'm
government to
I
tackle
would
these
not
things.
I would not disagree with you on some level. I'm not like I think that's a reasonable point. But I'll just take a perspective as I'm not really a car guy anymore because I'm a dad and I don't have time. But from the time I was a kid, I was obsessed with cars, right?
Yep.
And I remember reading Car and Driver in the 90s. And I remember the way the writers would talk about cars that would come out that were electric. And it was across the board, like Car and Driver, Road and Track, Automobile Magazine. It was electric cars were the butt of jokes. They
Yep.
just were. Like it was that was it. And then even the GM's EV1, just a butt of jokes for years, right? And again, I'm not speaking about everything. I'm only speaking about cars because it's something I followed and I can talk about at least a little bit. And it's that what happened with cars was the technology just caught up to the point where it became so good that electric cars are now, sold in the millions and millions. They're like some of the best selling cars in the world now, right? So it's like,
Yep.
I think in some cases, you're probably right. I wouldn't dispute the fact that, some oil companies would want to have the boots on the neck of startups that would disrupt their business model. But at some point, when the technology improves, that's the wonderful thing about technology is you can't contain, if as long as it's not heavily restricted, companies can make use of it and do wonderful things. And that's what happened with EVs. EVs are incredible. Like I never wanted an EV. Like, I still kind of don't, but I respect them though. I think they're in a lot of these EVs, even from companies like Hyundai, not just Tesla, they're pretty good. They're good vehicles. And then like the floodgates are open, right? Like there's no going back. Like my friend has whatever it is, like the Tesla Model X, and he says that he could never go back to a gas powered car. He said it'd be impossible. And see me, I'm not an electric car guy, so I don't understand that. But he
Yep.
said for day to day living, you can't go back. So I think a lot of this stuff, technology, will sort out. We have belief in humanity, and businesses are allowed to flourish and grow. And again, getting back to, just to wrap up, because I do have to go and I really appreciate your time. Um, but to kind of circle back to the beginning of the conversation and talking about Canada, like I'll tell you another gap that's going to be tough to bridge. And this isn't me. I don't work in finance. I have some family members who work in finance, and one of my friends does. The word, and you could probably, if you know people in finance, ask them this. But the word on the street through a lot of finance guys, they say capital will be leaving, the country because there's just not the desire to drive that right now in Canada, and there hasn't been for 10 years. And that's a big concern for people like me who want to live in this country. And if the Liberals do not change course and start encouraging investment and making the country more business savvy, there's going to be more problems, and capital will flee. Doesn't mean it's going to the U.S. They have their own problems, but there's a lot of places in the world capital can flow to if you're liquid, right? Like,
Okay.
so I think there's a big concern with that, and I think as much as I said, I do think some of this stuff is an unbridgeable gap because if the Liberals do not change course, what's going to happen is it's going to make that even more intense, and you're going to get people leaving and taking their capital with them, and that's going to put more pressure on everybody else. So I think overall, I think there is some hope, but I do think if after this election it shows that we're really divided, I think one of the paths forward is some form of separation. And I'm not, again, I think you've talked to me long enough to know that I'm not just coming into your live and dropping a bomb and trying to troll. Like I just
Nope.
think that if,
You've played us fair, so that's why I'm willing to listen.
well, yeah, so I'm open, but I do feel like when you cram people together who have increasingly different or polarized beliefs, it's going to cause more and more friction. And I don't see a way out of that. I really don't. Like I've thought about this for a long time, and I don't know if it was your wife that mentioned it earlier about even the incendiary stuff online, which is a great point. And she asked why that's happening, and I mean that's a very scary question to ask because it's
Yep.
gotten really bad.
Yep.
And I do not see that getting better. So
Now, do you understand what the New World Order was part of? A part of it was to actually denounce capitalization. Okay, the reason why they were trying to do that is because they didn't want to have 1% to be super rich and then the rest of them being 99%. They want to actually equal it out. Now, that as an idealistic thing, that might work, but it's not going to work in our generations. It's going to take numerous generations to have that mindset changed.
Yeah, Harley, I couldn't agree with you more because that's something that I've been pushing. That change needs to start with this generation that's coming
but
up.
are you
Uh,
concerned? Okay, last question, and
yeah,
I'll be able to listen to your answer, but I have to hang up because it's going to be noisy. I have to clean. Kids are in bed. But just regarding that, you want people to have more money. I mean, what would you say about the past years about the middle class? Like, I remember it's recirculated recently, but I remember the news stories boasting about how Canada's middle class, how well it was doing compared to so many places in the rest of the world. I think it was a New York Times article. You can Google it. I think it's circulating on X right now. Um, but it is a New York Times article basically boasting about Canada's middle class. And the reason why it's circulating is because all the information in it is basically flipped in the past 10 years, whereas a lot of other countries it hasn't. So people have been wondering why.
yeah.
And so I'd just like to hear your thoughts on that regarding, you mentioned about, the 99%, the 1%. I'd love to I'll listen in, but I got to bounce and really enjoyed your live. I was listening to you guys for a little while before I jumped on, and it was nice. Thanks for having me.
Jay, thanks for coming in. Beaver Network, we are about having open discussions and hearing from all sides of the political party and the political spectrum. So
Followed, man.
I
We'll maybe
appreciate.
pop in another day. Take care.
Please do.
I'd love to
I'll
hear your
just say,
thoughts on the middle class thing, though. I mentioned. I got to hang up now, but thank you
yeah.
so much.
So, Jay, as you're heading out the door, thank you very much. You came in a respectful manner, which I absolutely appreciate. And that's why I'd be happy to have you back again. Now, as far as what I really want to point out, and Dab, then I'm going to get to you. What I really want to point out with this situation is causation. This what we're seeing because the liberal government was also in the span of time that we had a global pandemic, a global shutdown. We had a major shift in the way that our trade operated previous. To Trump getting in. So all of these situations, it started out with the free trade agreements. At the end of the day, free trade is really what decimated manufacturing and the middle class in North America because we simply can't compete with a $10 a day wage. We simply can't. Because of that, over the long term, we've been seeing the slow fizzling out of the middle class of manufacturing because companies can ship it across the entire planet and still put it in the stores at half what it would take to manufacture here. Now, when COVID came along and disrupted the supply chains even further,
So,
broke down the systems either, just one moment, please, Dad, broke down all of these systems even further. That is what we're seeing as part of the stage that we have set because the business community, uh, because of COVID, saw their power and influence over the working class start to diminish out. And as soon as COVID was done, their first order of business was to get the working class back under their roof.
that
That's the reality of the situation. Dad, welcome to the show. Can I get an age and a rough location for you, please?
I'm I'm 46 years age, almost 47, and I worked the dirty holes drilling into the reef up north in Rainbow Lake.
10 years in the oil patch, bud.
Well, then you should know on Rainbow Lake there's a reef below the surface. You can drill into it, and that's all natural gas.
Yep.
And that's what I did. And it's a shit show every hole we did for a Husky at the time. But I think Husky sold, I don't know. I think they sold the wells. I'm not sure.
Right.
But yeah, like that was dangerous work. You had a
Absolutely.
pocket on you pump water like shit 30 kilometers down the road to pump in to get this natural gas, and they went and sold it to who? Probably the government, and they friggin' ran it all the way to Ontario and Quebec, everything for the natural gas. The federal government bought that pipe, those 2 holes, and those 2 holes were over like each hole was over like trillions of dollars of natural gas resources,
Okay.
like the rich stuff.
Okay. So where are you leading with all of this, Dad?
What I'm just saying is like there's no pipelines allowed, right?
Right.
But natural gas is allowed.
Okay. I'm failing to catch the point that you're making. Are you saying that the federal government is not subsidizing to move that gas to markets? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, they're not bringing it to Alberta, keeping it some in Alberta. They're just shipping away, and every
Sure.
time
Sure.
like,
But Dab, unfortunately, this goes back to
I know, I
the
know,
1970s and Trudeau and the National Energy Program here in Canada being scrapped. That is why we are dictated by oil markets around the world, because we didn't
yeah,
establish our own natural oil and gas reserves as a nationalized project. So
exactly.
that's
Hopefully, Daniel Smith does an awesome job.
well, she doesn't have control of that. So
No, she doesn't. That's the worst part.
Uh, but who would she ship it to? The only place that she would ship it to is the States, because that's who she's actually loyal to, not to Alberta.
I I know that, but so is Saskatchewan though too.
Yeah, but where you mentioned Danielle Smith. Danielle Smith just left America more concerned about how the tariff war was going to affect Trump and his reelection than she's concerned about anything in Alberta. So if you're going to
Yeah.
bring up Danielle Smith, this is going to be a tough crowd for you, bud.
Oh, I don't mind that because I don't know
Well,
Daniel
Sparkle,
Smith.
what do you?
within the next few years, you're going to see Canada actually supplying Canadians more. If true, put it this way, if the Liberal government actually does what they're saying they want to do, they want to actually have provincial intertrade. If that happens, then we will be using our own products in Canada. And just the other day, I found out that actually Husky Gas was sold to Co-op. I was kind of surprised that a Co-op even bought it,
Yeah.
because that's usually local areas, and basically they do the local areas, they support the local areas. So as it is, from what you're kind of saying is, yes, they're selling it either to Quebec or they're selling it to Ontario. Over there, as much as their natural gas, they can't get to it. Their shield's too hard.
No, it goes all the way to Nova Scotia. Our natural
Yeah,
gas in
that's it.
Alberta goes straight to Nova Scotia. There's a pipeline goes right through Quebec. Quebec takes it,
Yep.
and so does Nova Scotia now.
That's true because number one fact is natural gas is going to be easier to transport. It's not as messy
No, it's a
as an oil
pipeline.
line. An oil line, if it breaks, you have a big cost to actually clean up. Natural gas, if you have a break, it's just fixing the break. It's going to pollute the world, yes, but then also too, it's not going to be as big of a mess to clean up.
Yeah, but I'm just saying though, it's like I know my knowledge because like that's all I drilled was like sour wells,
Night Sparkle.
Yeah.
and I did the first disposal well in for Scotch Power in Saskatchewan in Scotch Power, fucking Estevan, Saskatchewan.
You're talking to the carbon capture.
Yeah, I was one of them.
Yeah.
I'm on a magazine.
Nothing wrong with that. That's, you're doing better. Put it this way, you're doing better things for the environment than what most people would even say you're doing.
No,
So don't feel that,
everyone called me the crazy one, and now I'm way too old. I left. I had to leave, and I started my own company. And the taxes that they put on my company was like insane. So I left my company, and I'm working for my buddy's company now.
Right on.
Oh, masonry. Way.
Alrighty, gentlemen, I'm just looking at the time here, so if I could get kind of a final thought from both of you, and we're gonna shut her down for tonight, and we'll see you back here next Saturday for Beaver Network. I am your host, Mr. Radical, and the host show is Radicalized here Saturdays at 6 o'clock. So, gentlemen, if you want to give me a final thought before we shut her down for the night, thanks for coming in.
Well, thanks for having your show and let me in.
Thank you, Deb. Harley.
First thing I'd like to say is thank you for actually inviting me into your group and letting me speak. My final thought is if you don't think climate change is not happening, all you have to do is look at Lake Louise's iceberg that's basically been melting away.
Yeah, that's happening. Whether we want to admit it to or not, but as my final thought about everything we've kind of talked about tonight, and one of the things that I often point out is Radicalized is about understanding the emotional background, the social background, about understanding how our brains interpret information. And I want to point out something about human fallacy because the reality is that nobody has more motivation to lie to you than you. Nobody has more impetus or desire to lie to you than you. So basically, when it comes to our opinions, even if we are wrong, we will stick by those opinions because at the end of the day, there's nothing that human beings like better than being right, even when they're wrong. And that's my final word for the tonight. I want to thank
I
all of my
kind of
guests that were
concur
on
to
tonight.
that.
Thank you, Dab. Thank you, Harley. I
You're
hope to have
welcome.
you back again.
I will.
Have a good night, gentlemen, and we will see you next week. Thank you for joining in here on Radicalized. I'm your host, Mr. Radical, and I will see you next week. Have a terrific night, everybody.